Hello, welcome once again to another episode of Interesting Stories in the History of Diagnostics. This is Mickey Urdea for Halteres Associates. Today we're going to be speaking about schistosomiasis, which is a disease state that came up in one of our previous stories, which concerned this wormy world. And during that episode, I mentioned a person, Govert Van Dam, who I got to meet several years ago, in fact, 2016, at a meeting in Lake Annecy in France. That was a time when the Gates Foundation had a meeting concerning schistosomiasis and brought in experts from around the world. And Halteres Associates had an opportunity to help organize that. So during that meeting, I had a chance to meet Govert. And Govert has been working with schistosomiasis for more than 25 years. Started all the way back in 1988 when he was doing his PhD work at the University of Leiden. And today we're going to have an opportunity to talk with him about his work over all those years and what's going on now. And so I'd like to introduce Govert and welcome him to Interesting Stories in the History of Diagnostics. Well, it's great to see you once again, Govert. Unfortunately, we're on Zoom instead of in person, but hopefully we'll be able to deal with that in not too far distant future. I do recall the last time we met was at Lake Annecy with the meeting that the Gates Foundation sponsored on schistosomiasis. That was a great meeting. I thought we got a lot of wonderful interactions, and I'm sure we'll touch on a number of the issues that were dealt with there. But in particular, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk to you because of all the work you've done over the last 25 years and the circulating antigens for schistosomiasis and where that's all taken us. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in that area and the work you've been doing with the University of Leiden for all these years?
Yeah, no, sure. Happy to do that. Actually, there were two reasons. In my student time, when I was studying chemistry at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, I got quite involved in the International Christian Student Mission organization called IVS. And through that organization and through the people I met in that organization, I really got inspired to continue my scientific education and also to serve with the scientific education, the people what they call now in the global south, so in lower middle income countries, in really communities in need. So that's my first reason that I wanted to focus in that area with my scientific and professional life. And the second reason is that I became really fascinated by the immune system and all the very special biological, biochemical, cellular, all the mechanisms in there. They were fantastic. So I wanted to know more about that. So when there was an opportunity to become a PhD in parasitology, and to study the host parasite relationship, I chose that opportunity. Yeah. So and then I continued in that because it is still, both of the reasons are still fascinating and inspiring to me, to be honest.
Yeah. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that work led to the work that eventually resulted in a commercial product for schistosomiasis.
Yeah, you mean about the POC-CCA at the moment then? Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Now, yeah, during my PhD, of course, you work on tools and develop assays. Besides, general biochemistry and studying mechanisms in host parasite. So we were able to elucidate the molecular structure of both of the antigens, CAA and CCA, and we also improve the assays in a number of ways. So after my PhD, I really wanted to get involved in more translational science. So the developments that we had in the lab, to put them in practice and make them use for those people who really need it. And then the CCA antigen, which is easily excreted in the urine, we could transform the assay in a lateral flow assay, in an RDT, in a potential RDT. We received a couple of grants, and we found a company in South Africa who was willing to take it up as a commercial product. So that's how we came to the POC-CCA as a commercial product.
Yeah, interesting. And I know I've heard you speak before about some of the issues with regard to CCA as opposed to CAA, and that there's a lot of work going on in CAA now. When do you think we might see a product based on CAA on the market, and what would the advantages be?
Oh, that's a very good question.
I bet you wish you knew the answer too.
Yeah, I started working on RDTs in the late 90s, and then we got that project. I think it was 2004 or something. So I thought that would be a commercial product for that before 2010, and anyway, there was the product about the POC-CCA actually within a couple of years, but before it really took off, it took a lot of years, and only about now it came into the WHO guidelines using the POC-CCA, but the assay or the test was on the market in 2008. Imagine, then we're talking 15 years. So, but then, okay, CAA, what a big difference for the CAA as respect to the CCA is that now there is a consortium working on a CAA RDT, a consortium working led by FIND Diagnostics, funded by, among others, GID and the Gates Foundation, and there are a couple of well-known companies also involved. So I think this project has really a good chance to bring this CAA RDT to the market in a couple of years. That's what they expect. But this is one of the CAA tests. It is an RDT based on using finger prick blood to be used in the field in monitoring evaluation situations, which is really different from the other CAA tests that we are still employing in our lab. It's still a laboratory-based assay. That's a different assay with a different label, and we are also focusing on a different type of clinical sample, urine instead of serum blood.
Right. And what would the advantages be of having CAA instead of CCA as the most used product?
Specificity of CAA is expected to be a lot better than for CCA, because CAA has no biological equivalent, and it's a completely unique antigen. It's not nowhere seen in nature an antigen or a biochemical structure like that. While CCA has some similarities with host and other compounds. So there is a potentially a bit of background in the CCA, and we try to overcome that obviously with the use of monoclonal antibodies and good technical specifications. But there is a potential of having a bit of biological background. So CAA would not have that, and CAA is in sufficient amount excreted by all the schistospecies, while CCA is mostly excreted by Mansonae, and the amount of CCA excreted by Hematobium and Japonicum is a lot less than for Mansonae. So that's why the POC-CCA is positioned to African intestinal schisto rather than the other schistospecies. So that's an advantage of the CAA over the CCA.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you've been working with the folks at Leiden for a very long time, and I know it's been a very productive relationship for all of you. And just curious about how that's impacted the progress over the years by having such a long-term and consistent set of interactions.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of advantages of being or becoming senior in a way. I mean, in the same area, because you're able to apply your experience and your knowledge for a long term. I don't need to really change a lot of knowledge. You just build upon it, so to say. But as you can say, I mean, how can you not get bored after so long? And one of the ways of not getting bored is having 2 or 3 jobs, because in the previous one, I'm involved in the family business for more than 25 years, and so having a number of different affiliations is obviously one of the ways to not get too bored. But my main motivation and inspiration is working with people, and I really like to work with people in a respectful, honest, and open and transparent way, and that is very important. So that makes it also not really different to work in a family business in concrete. Or at the science, or in different other areas, like you mentioned in the previous interview, in the church, for instance. I mean, it's all about people, which is the most important thing. So and not to forget young people. I mean, when you get older, there are young people coming, and then there's a turnover, and etc. So that's continuous inspiration.
I recall learning from you about you work in the concrete business, and I thought, now there's a really interesting juxtaposition. Neglected tropical diseases in concrete. It's difficult to think of things that are so much more different than that. One person will be working on. It's fascinating.
There's a like I said, people, but there's also a bit of chemistry involved in both of them. And nowadays, I must confess, and that's also a point of discussion with a lot of my senior colleagues, the science part, when you get older and more involved in project management and funding, etc., the science part of your work is getting less and less, and it's almost all management and reporting and finances and stuff like that, which is not the most interesting part of my job, to be honest. Yeah.
I recall sending you an email several years ago when I had read a book on sort of the science of concrete. Why I would read that, I don't know, but there are self-healing concretes that involve B. subtilis and fungi. So I thought, wow, now there's an interesting juxtaposition of the two sciences.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I think there were bacteria at the time that were put into the concrete, with when they got exposed to oxygen would make some components, which then would help with the cracking if
exactly,
and heal it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So what other types of research might you be conducting at the moment? And we'd also like to find out, what do you think the chances of finding the equivalent of CCA or CAA in other worm-associated diseases might be?
Yeah. Now we did, and we are still doing quite a bit of work on carbohydrates and polysaccharides, and particularly my colleague Ron Hokke is a professor of glycobiology in our department. And I think that in other parasites, there are definitely unique carbohydrate structures, which potentially would also serve as a target for immunodiagnostic assays. So I think that biologically, biochemically, there are for sure options there. The question is, where are those structures? And where do you find them? And what kind of samples do you need? So if you want to find them, for instance, in stool, a lot of parasites are in the bowels, for instance. Stool is not a very preferred sample type nowadays. So that is a challenge as such. We did a little bit of work on Ascaris in the past with some other colleagues, and we found opportunities there. So I think that biologically, biochemistry, that's possible. The question is, where are you looking to find them? And then, of course, the real big question is who's going to fund it? Because it is quite a research project. Technically, biologically, I think there's definitely options. I'm sure Ron Hokke will confirm that there's so much interesting, unique structures in helminths and parasites, and we can definitely find something that is of diagnostic interest. But who's going to fund it?
Yeah, absolutely. They don't call these neglected tropical diseases for nothing. It's very unfortunate. What is the biological purpose, do you think, for the secretion of these antigens by the worms?
Yeah, that is one of the things that I would actually like to study if there is still some time available in my scientific career, and funding obviously as well, because that always fascinated me. Why is the parasite excreting these components in such basically enormous amounts? And I did a little bit in it. One of the components, CAA, has an interaction with the complement system. Now, first of all, the worm is living in the bloodstream, which means it is exposed to all the defense mechanisms, immune defense mechanisms that the host has. And it is able to circumvent all those mechanisms and live for more than 30 years, as you said, more than 30 years in the host. So it must have different mechanisms to overcome all this. And I think that the antigens play a role in that. And as I said, CAA is interacting with the complement system. So because that's one of the systems that the parasite needs to block, because otherwise it gets attacked and it cannot survive. So that's one of them. And I think the blood clotting system as such, we didn't show it, but the structure of CAA sort of intuitively tells us that it has to do something with clotting. It can do something with clotting, but it's not a very easy thing to study. We are now working on synthetic CAA, and if we, for instance, would have sufficient amount of that component, then you can do, of course, you can use that in clotting studies. We are purifying larger amounts, so that's an opportunity. So that is one. These are two of the things of CAA, I think, is an option. And CCA, as it is quite different. One of the things that we showed is it helps to evade the immune system, which makes use of some Lewis X components. So it helps the parasite in a bit of an indirect way. And in general, because of the polysaccharide nature, they are mucin-like components. So, and they are from the gut. So they also have just a general gut protective.
Right.
Function, yeah.
There might be some hidden mechanisms of the immune system that will be revealed by looking at this. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I know that testing alone is not the only barrier to dealing with schistosomiasis in these areas. And I know you've talked a bit about availability of the agents that are required, like praziquantel. What would you like to talk about with regard to that? I know it's something important to you.
You mean that the praziquantel is available?
Available where you test? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, my colleagues in the Nordic countries tells me that it's very expensive to buy praziquantel, and it will cost them several days' salary for one treatment of praziquantel. So imagine that, I don't know how much you earn, but suppose that you have to pay a week's salary for a treatment.
Yeah.
That is something that people really cannot afford. So that is one thing. The price of the treatment is very expensive. That's why most of them are put through donation programs with large donations from Merck, guided through WHO and other agencies. So, but just having the praziquantel available in pharmacies is as an affordable price is really a challenge.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate. Out of curiosity, did you have an experience when you were younger having to do something with parasitology that got you interested in this, or was there some other reason that you became interested?
I think I'm from the generation that everybody had worms when they were children. Huh? This little wriggling white stuff coming out of the back, and then causing all kinds of itching and so on. So that is basically my main experience with parasitic worms, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. You probably are aware of the interesting debate on ivermectin in treatment of COVID, and just knowing your expertise in these parasitic diseases. Did that strike you as very odd? Is it does some of us?
Yeah, no, that's true. Of course, we are aware. I don't really follow it, to be honest. I mean, from all different areas in society, we know that some people can be convinced of anything. If the voice is strong enough, then people are, they can easily be influenced. People are vulnerable on different aspects. But with respect to this ivermectins, I mean, we believe in evidence-based science and evidence-based treatment strategies and policies. So a good clinical trial for this would be very relevant. And as well as obviously then a good way to evaluate the clinical trials. And as far as I have followed it, there's not sufficient hard data that ivermectin can really treat COVID. There's some anecdotal evidence, which is also evidence, but it's not sufficient, for medical doctors to base their policies and the treatment policies on anecdotal evidence. And as I believe in miracles, obviously, as well, and they do really exist, but you cannot make a policy or how do you say that, beleid, policy, based on miracles. Although you cannot also not completely ignore them. So that is the challenge with this kind of things. You have to separate the chaff from the corn. Do you say that in English?
Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of this notion of ropeworms? And there is a debate about whether or not this is a real disease or not. What are your thoughts concerning that?
Yeah, I haven't heard about ropeworms as such, so I looked it up. I just Googled it a little bit, and so then I understand the discussion, because we have similar things. I mean, we work in the department of parasitology. So I sometimes hear from my colleague clinicians about delusional parasitosis, which sounds like a parasitological disease, but it's not. It's not a parasitological disease, it's a psychiatric disorder. It's a known phenomenon, and it can cause very, very complex problems. If people suffer from delusional parasitosis, it's not a joke, you know. They go through extreme fears, and sometimes they even have to take antipsychotics. So with respect to these ropeworms, it might be into that direction. I don't know. As far as I could see, the quick evidence, it isn't going into that direction. And then, of course, as a scientist, the answer is evidence-based science, you know, the theories and analysis. But it's also good to realize that there are a lot of different aspects to that as well.
Some people advocate using deworming agents in general for pinworms and other common parasitic infections. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, yeah, you ask that to a person who develops diagnostics. And so you can more or less predict my answer. I say no. But also, you know, but also from a sort of reasonable point of view, I think you should avoid giving medicines to people who really don't need it for many different reasons. And so although I understand and also am supportive about the preventive chemotherapy that they are applying in Africa, one of the reasons is that, I mean, those kids would not get praziquantel in any case, and it has really an enormous effect on the morbidity. So that has really been a very good approach. So I don't criticize on that. But you, on the other hand, you must also realize that if your own kids would be at such schools, and there would be people coming to the school and forcing them to take pills in a periodic way for things that you really wouldn't, you know whether they had it or not. That just wouldn't work, you know. You don't want that. And so the answer to that, to preventive medicine, would be vaccines. And I do believe in that, very much so. But preventive chemotherapy as a kind of, final strategy, I am a bit hesitant. But again, not the MDA. I don't criticize the MDA as such, because I think these are great programs, but there are also limitations to that.
And better local testing will permit us to go to test and treat as opposed to MDA.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's also known from the countries that we work. You know, if you can show to somebody that he has the 2 red stripes instead of the 1 red stripe on a lateral flow test, then they also easily take the medicine. And especially the medicine for schisto. I mean, it does make you feel sick in most cases for a while, short while. It doesn't really make you sick, but it makes you feel sick. And so you also need to have a reason how to convince people to take it. And the two red lines instead of the 1 is a good reason.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we?
No, not really. And I mean, there's lots of things I have to say, obviously, but
yes.
No, I have. I'm happy that I choose parasitology, and I worked in it. I have fantastic colleagues from my own department, from all over the world, and I'm really positive about it all. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I look forward to see them more, even more, and again after the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time. It was great to talk with you. We got a lot of wonderful information from you, and I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Thanks so much.
Let's hope, and then we can share another beer. Okay.
Yeah, great.